G'day viewers, I've got David Orban here and we're going to be discussing the anti-aging phenomenon in the media, especially with regards to Calico, Google's aging research initiative. Um, Now, David's the CEO of .sub, which is an online translation, um, online application for translating stuff. David's also an advisor and a faculty member of Singularity University. Cheers, David. Good to have you here.
Hello, very nice to be with you.
Mhm. Well, it's certainly been a very interesting sort of year this year for like especially companies like Google and people getting together and sort of rewarding scientific initiatives. It was early on in the year, I think, like needs to be brought into the focus too, is that Yuri Milner, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sergey Brin got together with some others and started rewarding scientists for their achievements. And they were giving away lots more money than people get for being a Nobel Prize winner too.
Yes, the opportunity certainly seems to be there today to go strongly in a direction of positive feedback cycles.
Hmm.
And we are seeing a lot of people who have the financial resources and the type of mindset to overcome certain types of thinking from the past that would have never gone into this direction. It is, from my point of view, extremely refreshing and quite exciting to see this. Obviously, we are still at the very beginning. I think that the action that we are seeing now is necessary,
Okay.
but not sufficient. And there's no guarantee, not only for success, obviously, but we have to be very careful to see that the impetus of this is going to go along.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that came to my mind as well. It seems like Google does have a lot of money, so let's just dream up. What could a company with like 55 billion at their fingertips do to a cause like aging research and anti-aging?
Well, from Google's point of view, I think we have to take into account three different groups of um, stakeholders, really, and their interests. The traditional stakeholders, the shareholders of Google, have some say in what Google does, but given the specific share structure and voting structure that the founders of Google put in place, actually, they don't determine too much what is going on. Of course, as long as Google's shares go up in value as they have been doing, and recently they broke the psychological barrier of $1,000 per share, nobody would dare to start a proxy battle or boardroom fights or tell Sergey and Larry what they should be doing. But it could very well be the case that, as it happened with Apple during 2013, that Google shares go down even considerably, and then shareholders will say, "Hey, why are you spending money here, there, or there else?"
Mm.
It, of course, from an absolute point of view, the numbers are still small with respect of how much cash Google has.
Hmm.
A few $100 million invested in this direction are really just a fraction of the tens and tens of billions of dollars that Google has in cash and short-term investment,
Mm. Hmm.
which itself is interesting because it is an indication that even very inquiring and creative companies like Google are not sure what to do with all their money. ideas and talent to put ideas into action are scarcer than capital from their point of view. So the second group of stakeholders that are involved in this process are the founders of Google, Sergey and Larry.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very interested in personal health. They have shown this in the past too. So I'm sure that from their point of view, we are only seeing the beginning of what could be done, and potentially even more radical initiatives are going to be announced in the future.
Mm.
The third group that I want to mention are the Google engineers, the people who do the things, whether traditional computer engineering, IT people, or the new type of talent that certainly Calico and other initiatives will need. The more exciting, the more impact what these projects imply, the easier to attract outstanding talent. And through the computerization, the softwareization of so much of what we do in research and engineering, it is certainly becoming true or truer. It's not that it wasn't before, that outstanding talent means not an incremental benefit, but an outsized benefit. Just like an exceptional programmer can be 1,000 times better than an average programmer, an exceptional talent in biotech, in bioinformatics, in synthetic biology, in anti-aging research, with the help of our IT infrastructure, can be 1,000 times more creative, more productive, and more impactful. And so that is why it is so important that these projects are exciting, because they need to attract this kind of unique talent.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think Larry and Sergey have any personal commitment to this project?
Oh yeah, I mean, evidently through their public interviews and public communications, they already confirmed that they are interested in understanding their own health. The quite dramatic announcement of a certain level of association or genetic predisposition for Parkinson's disease
Sure.
from Sergey's side, or the ailment that has been afflicting Larry with regards to his vocal cords, and his deep understanding and deep study of what caused it and how to overcome it, cure it if possible. These are all indications of how alert they are to their personal health, and they certainly understand their own value, so they want to invest in that value. They want to preserve their health as long as they can.
Right. I mean, like, surely, I mean, this is fundamental research that it seems that Google are committing to. At least that's what it sounds like on the outset. They said it's a moonshot. They say it's a long-term project. They're talking timescales like 20 or more years, I believe, from memory. So it's not like a short-term spin-off to make a product directly relating to their type of disease. It's more like, let's research the fundamentals of aging, and maybe, if they're lucky, this will, in the shorter term, address some fundamental problem that's connected with aging, that's associated with Parkinson's. Maybe Parkinson's has got like a real fundamental problem with the intrinsic biological degradation associated with old age. they've probably done a lot of
Yeah,
research,
I
but
didn't mean
it's
to
not.
imply that I didn't mean to imply that what they are doing right now would be directly related to their
Mm.
specific ailments
Yeah, yeah,
or
sure, okay.
predisposition.
Mm.
I use those as examples to illustrate what can be fairly assumed to be their
Mm.
personal interests. And
Mm.
as a consequence, since they have the means, generalizing from there, I think it is a very easy step. Just because they
It
are in
sounds
their
easy, but
late 30s or early 40s now,
mm.
that doesn't mean that they don't realize that they will get old. And
So
when
here's the
they
thing:
will get old,
Larry
they
Ellison
don't ahead.
Foundation
There
was did invest quite a lot of money into aging research as well, right? This Larry Ellison is the CEO of Oracle, one of the biggest database providers and also large software providers in the world, especially enterprise management systems, PeopleSoft and such. Now they got a lot of money. He's got a lot of money, but the Larry Ellison Foundation was doing research on this. But from my understanding, the research was targeted towards specific ailments relating to aging and maybe not so much the fundamental long-term research payoffs that could happen. And so it brings to mind, well, will would Google, especially with the investor pressure that you mentioned before, crumble to take up short-term, easier targets, short-term technological spin-offs, instead of like keeping to the guns and going, doing the long-term fundamental research that seems to be required in order to tackle aging in a very meaningful way.
So my opinion is that as long as the structure of the investment and the explicit communications to the various stakeholders are set up in a certain way so that expectations are correctly managed, there's no reason to believe that there would be such a radical shift and going away from the fundamental research, from the long-term broad um, pursue X, Y, or Z specific. Also because the entire DNA of the organization that is being set up is for the first general type of research. So it would be myopic to believe that just because there is a given type of shareholder pressure, the organizations could be usefully retargeted to do short term. In some sense, or in many ways, actually, it would be, if that were the case, to shut it down and restart rather than reorient the organization. That is at least what I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't see why. Um, I can imagine that Google may, like, if there's any, like, progress towards this long road of fundamental research towards, like, a real fundamental understanding of aging, some short-term technological spin-ups become available, but not at the expense of the long-term goal. I can't see why Google wouldn't take advantage of those. But yeah, completely reorienting the goals of the organization would be sad. I'm not. Yeah, yeah, it would be a sad thing if they had to shut down Calico and restart it to focus on, creating another resveratrol or something. Oh, well.
Yep.
Hmm. And what about Aubrey's organization Sens? Now their head offices aren't very that much far away from Google. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure that Larry and Sergey know about like Sens Foundation. It'd be very nice if there was some form of communication. I don't know if there already has or have been. I did interview Aubrey a while ago, um, and it seems as though there hadn't been any formal communication between Sens and Calico at that time. But it seems like a logical thing to do. since Aubrey's does have, well, to me, a rational approach to solving aging that is very fundamental. And yeah, I'm wondering whether that will happen or whether Google will stay
So,
like sort of closed.
so yeah, I'm sure that as the whole concept of anti-aging research and anti-aging applications, hopefully, is becoming more and more mainstream, there will be venues and opportunities for cross-fertilizing the thinking of the researchers, who are the ones who make this thing happen, right? They are the ones who need to be on the fine balance between being original and practical, between being independent but not delusionally self-reliant. I am sure that either through a conference or through other types of communication channels, this kind of cross-fertilization is going to happen. I also believe that it is healthy for the Google initiative to go along a different path. The probability that Aubrey and Sense are on the right path is a given probability, larger than zero. On the other hand, that this is the only path and the only line of activity and line of research needed is quite small. So I would say that it is important to have also alternative approaches that do not follow in lockstep what is the SENSE program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's agreed. However, that doesn't invalidate the benefits that could be had by the organisations communicating about their approaches. Sure. Look,
Correct.
Orby
Yeah.
may be wrong. So yes, that's very true, David. So well, let's talk about like the benefits of long-term research over technological spin-offs. Specifically, why? I mean, what's the use of long-term research if it's not self-evident to everybody who is listening?
Um, yeah. Well, I don't I don't mind elaborating on that a little bit. In any case, so many times we hear the fallacy of the reasoning. It probably has a name, and it escapes me right now. Oh, why are we doing X? We have so much else to take care of here and now, and that X,
Okay.
whatever that is,
Hyperbolic
seems to
discounting.
be out. Yeah, and people don't realize how subjective and arbitrary their own judgment of what needs to be taken care of and to what degree until to their own satisfaction, whatever X is can be started. Is there going to be ever a moment when not only that single individual, but everybody in a given group says, okay, now we are done, we solved world hunger, or we solved poverty, or we solved whatever else their pet issue is, and now we can take care of space exploration, or we can take care of anti-aging research, because those other things. So this is the first thing. In our world, luckily, we are aware of rich opportunities and how the freedom of groups with the resources that are available to them to pursue those opportunities and their interests can be preserved and can be executed. Another issue regarding fundamental research is that we have those of us who care to understand, we have very keen realization of how little we know, in every possible field. And even in fields or in subfields where we think we understand so much, actually we don't. And there are very important limits that can be pushed out or narrowed so that our knowledge is expanded in so many fields. Physics, chemistry, biology, engineering have all for their practitioners represented areas where there's a lot to be done. And we have seen time and again how fundamental research that doesn't seem to have immediate applications turns out to be of fundamental importance for somebody who needs a solution to their problem. A perfect example of this is the special relativity, the theory of special relativity. Relativity. The first somewhat unnatural consequence of a series of analysis and a series of theories that physicists were already on the path of doing, regardless of Einstein's genius at the turn of the century, a little more than 100 years ago. The second, really a leap of genius that wasn't natural or wasn't immediately foreseeable from existing premises. And for a long time, people were skeptical about the results. Then some experimental confirmations came, and both the special and the general theory of relativity were vindicated as being applicable to falsifiable situations, and they were able to predict the outcomes that were observed. Much later, just a few decades ago, came the applications. Our global positioning system, the geostationary satellites, and the signals that they emit to our ground-based receivers. Yesterday, our in-car navigation systems. Today, our mobile phones depend on the tiny adjustments that need to be made to these signals and their time of travel or expected time of travel based on the special and the general relativity, without which we wouldn't be able to do navigation as fine-tuned as possible. When you whip up your latest phone with the latest hardware and software, you see how responsive it is and how very precisely it puts you on the spot where you are. And this is due to our fundamental research and fundamental understanding, in this case, of physics, of gravity, of the propagation of electromagnetic signals, and so on. So similarly, in biology and in chemistry and in nutrition and physiology and the way organisms work, or the metabolism of a cell, we have an enormous amount of knowledge to acquire, and only if we do that we will be able to create applications that transform this knowledge into cures, into preventative medicine and other ways. It is, I think, very naive, and I hope not too much rooted in public perception that scientists can just go out and by their sheer willpower coupled with luck and sweat find solutions that are not grounded in the results and the experiments and the theories of their predecessors. It is you know, the lone scientist and the somewhat lunatic genius is a very common subject represented in movies, but that is not the way how science and engineering work. People actually rely on results of others, and it is only pushing forward fundamental results and fundamental research that novel applications can be developed.
Cool. All right. So I guess that means you're in favor of long-term research.
Yes, that
Awesome.
absolutely, that is absolutely correct. Now, it is also, I think, one of the reasons to build thriving global economies, because we are at the level where something like the Large Hadron Collider, that is a machine for doing fundamental research, and by a beautiful coincidence, and the LHC has been able to prove the theories formulated 50 years ago while the person coming up with those ideas was still living. Well, those machines and those timescales are around the boundary of what we are today capable of doing as a human civilization. Spending 30 billion euros, 40, 50 billion dollars over the course of 25 plus years with tens of thousands of scientists collaborating is what we can do now. But it is guaranteed that next generation discoveries proving other theories concerning not necessarily or not only physics, but other fields of knowledge will require an order of magnitude or two order of magnitude larger collaborations, both in terms of the skills and the human resources involved and in terms of the financial resources involved. If we want to go to the stars, if we want to radically prolong the human lifespan, there will be not tens of billions of dollars to be spent, but hundreds or thousands of billions of dollars. And I think that is one of the best reasons to want to keep our economy expanding. And the challenge, of course, is that we need to do so in a sustainable manner, because the way that our economy has been expanding for the past couple of hundred years is not something that we can keep doing to the planet for the next couple of hundred years.
I'm certainly hoping that the advance of technologies allow for larger scale projects to become cheaper and cheaper, but I can't guarantee that that's going to happen. It seems as though you're expecting that the future grand projects that we undertake are going to get more and more expensive. But you know, I guess as we refine material science, nanotechnology, AI, and other technologies, it may end up being the opposite. Well, I can't really guarantee that.
I understand what you are saying, and it is definitely true that we can do a lot of things cheaply, and that there are entire fields where things are becoming radically cheaper. A great example is how simple today you can create something in software that impacts
virtual technologies.
Millions of people or hundreds of millions of people or even a billion people and you can do it in your garage, and you only need a few tens of thousands of dollars, maybe, or you need a few $1,000s to
It's where
buy
Google
an
started.
iPhone and a Mac. Yeah, that's right. And well, but actually things are easier than when Google started because
They are.
they
Yeah, I
couldn't
know.
rely on studying cloud infrastructure. A kid in his or her garage today, starting a mobile app on iPhone or Android, can rely on the cloud infrastructure that Google or Apple have built in the meantime, on the massive deployment of the end devices or smartphones where they install the apps, the payment infrastructure that hundreds of millions of people participate in for the tiny transactions of a few dollars that each of us very easily do on a daily basis. Um, Now, that's great. And um, I am not worried about the things that are cheap to do because they are cheap to do.
Well, what sort of things are going
And
to be
the
more
multiplicity
expensive?
of well, so what I'm worried about, or not worried, I mean, the reason I'm that our global economy is so important is because there will be things that are going to be complex, expensive, and difficult. So a great example of this is building a starship. We don't even know how, but we know that when we will start understanding how, it is going to be extremely complex and extremely expensive from a point of view, at least of energy densities and the power deployed required to send people or even send just machines to the next star to understand things about that remote location. Um, in terms of energies required, um, imagine if a public announcement came that we have to turn off the lights and keep them off for 10 years because all the energy of all of the planet is needed to propel the starship in its mission. Um, because those are the energies that would be needed. Now, evidently, we are not ready to turn off our lights, to um, stop our fridges, and not to run our cars, and not to heat our houses. So that gives you an idea of how radically
So
fundamental this change.
yeah, so it does seem as though if we're going to make a device which is effective enough to transport people in a shell to another star system, that's like, more than like what how many light at least a few light years away, right? I don't know, like
The
quite
closest
far.
star, the closest star is 2.3 light years away,
Mm, yeah.
but it is
Is it
not the
habitable?
one that we would visit. Exactly. Well, no star is habitable as far as we know. What you mean is, are there planets around the star that are
Mm,
habitable,
mm.
and not the closest ones?
But you can
So the
imagine that there
closest
would be
star would
fundamental
be,
research that would needed to be done in order to pull something like that off with the resources that
yeah,
we can marshal on Earth. And it seems to me like, the Drexlerian sort of molecular nanotechnology dreams. I think they're a fantastic research avenue. Um, that's the sort of thing I'd like to see the world spend a whole heap of money on. Things like,
yeah,
advanced
yeah,
atomically precise manufacturing. With and then
absolutely.
later
Yeah.
with really cheap and very durable substrates to build like massive bubbles to transfer people across the galaxy in, or maybe even transform ourselves, would be a more economical option in the long run than trying to make bubbles out of the materials that we can marshal today, given our current level of knowledge. So I mean, like we need to be really wise in the roadmaps that we create to these larger scale uh, um, engineering efforts. And I think that's the
Yep.
reason why massive amounts of money would be good to funnel into fundamental research, because almost every endeavor could benefit from better material, and any endeavor that you could make significant advances with more intelligence, then AI would be a good thing to sort of like research as well. So yeah, I'm all for fundamental research. That's a large scale future. All these large scale projects should be really funded seriously. And aging's one of them, because hell, I want to be alive to see some of the wonderful advances that humanity has ahead. Now, what do you think? What are the chances of us? I mean, we're of similar age, I believe. What are the chances of us having access to some of these therapies there, David? What do you think?
I think it is 100% that we will gain some benefit. Now, the question is, I think also, at least that is my opinion or my point of view, what do you define as radical life extension? Is going from 80 years of average lifespan or life expectancy at birth, going to 100, is that radical life expansion?
Hmm.
From my point of view, as long as you live a fulfilling life that is full of passion, that is full of friendship, that is full of human relationships, where if you choose to have them, you have biological children and see them grow and have grandchildren. Living 80 years or 100 years is not radically different. It's not that I wouldn't choose the 100 years lifespan over the 80 years if it is healthy and if my body reasonably keeps up, and if my brain is full of curiosity, and I can engage in useful ways with the outside world and hopefully keep contributing to it. So I would. However, when I think about radical life extension and the things that I would be curious of doing, I am personally more eager to understand what happens when you are 1,000, a million, or a billion years old, and that is the way that I prefer thinking about it. Now, what is interesting is that in order to get 1,000 years old, you have to get 100 years old, and in order to get 2,000 years old, you have to get 1,000 years old. So it doesn't matter where we want to get. It is a path that we have to get through. And at each stage, there will be different challenges, very likely. So we have to plan ahead, create progressive bridges towards the solutions of the new challenges that we will meet. So back to your question. We will have definitely benefits from research, pharmacology, behavioral research. For example, I am too fat, and social pressure is building to make my being fat not acceptable. And I can definitely see people in different ways, but similar, like they are today, ostracized and expelled from human society because they smoke. And in New York, if you smoke, you are a leper, to be applied to people who are fat. And this kind of behavioral engineering, memetic engineering on a social level is very effective. So I see all of this already happening. And then the question is, are the bridges going to be built? And are we, as individuals, going to be able to go through each of those bridges in order to get to the next stage, you know, from 100 years, 120, from 120, 150, 50, and so on. So I see the likelihood of each of those bridges to be ready right at the right time, and for us to go through those bridges to the next stage repeatedly as slim. Mm-hmm. So philosophically, it is still the case that we should come to grips with our personal mortality. And then the question is, what do you do if you don't want to, or if you want to do it in a manner that is non-traditional? And then we are going into things like come to grips with our personal mortality, biological mortality. So if we do not want to do that, if we do not want to throw in the towel, if we say, okay, I understand that I am personally, biologically mortal, but I still want to find a solution, then of course we are talking about backing up your identity, backing up your brain, backing up your mind.
Cryonics and stuff. But I wasn't actually talking about like immortality. I try and shy away from that concept because, I mean, logically you can't stand at the end of time and point back at all the Everett branches of the multiverse and see at each one you've sort of lived for such and such a long time and say, see, I'm immortal. But I mean, what we can do is do our best to live healthy for as long as possible, so that we're happy and sane and that we're flourishing. Of course, a longer life with longer health span would enable us to achieve more, but it doesn't necessarily follow that a longer life is a better life just because it's longer. If that's the only measure to sort of measure the quality of life, for sure. But your point specifically about the coming to grips with mortality isn't mutually exclusive from the idea of wanting to at least support the research of Orby de Grey, or supporting health span extension, or or what can be achieved with longevity escape velocity. I think it's our coming to grips with our existential angst of suddenly not being there, right? The non-existence phenomenon is difficult. So back to you. I mean, what do you think is the most human and I guess the best way for you personally to deal with this existential angst that, from my understanding, most people feel when they think about things like death?
So I do not see a contradiction between anti-aging research and understanding that mortality is a fact. I also do not see radical life extension the way I defined it, thousands of years of lifespan, as being equal to immortality. Very simply and somewhat sarcastically, just because you eliminate three biological causes of death, it doesn't mean that you eliminate buses. People will still go under buses and be killed. The future equivalent of buses. Now, if you have backups and you can reinstantiate backups, then from the point of view of the subjective experience of the backup that has been restored, that is a different way of continuing the life, and it is of course once it is ingrained in the subjective experience that you can do that, and it becomes normal, it will be a subjective perception as if the individual were immortal. And the other thing that you asked concerning my personal relationship with this existential angst is twofold. On one hand, I have an incredible level of satisfaction in seeing branches of possibility embodied by my biological children, about the fact that they can do things that they have been taught by me that they can attempt, and they have their own unique creativity and unique passion and desires for attempting to do things that I've never thought of, totally different from me. And this addition of new novelty, these ingredients are extremely refreshing. One of my fears of a society that has people living arbitrarily long is actually the lack of possibility of scientific, conceptual, social revolutions, because the status quo can be so efficiently preserved by those who have been there 50 years ago, who have been there 100 years ago, and they just stabilize what is possible. And it is one of the reasons why space exploration is so important in a society that lives very long, because it is a very good way of leaving the old behind and going with the new. Another thing that I want to say in closing, perhaps, is that the way society will cope, in my opinion, with radically extended lifespans is understanding death better and the role of death better in the lives of individuals and that of society. Today, 99% of the people dying and the way people are dying is what I would define much less than humane. It is a bad way to die, unnecessarily complicated, unnecessarily convoluted, and not at all serene. So learning to live long, in my view, is also going to mean learning how to die better. And at the end of that process, what I see is that euthanasia, or even suicide, technically, are going to be the only human way to die. Because everything else is somebody else deciding, or something else deciding, whether a disease or the proverbial bus. And since we are defined by what we do, our willpower allows us to do, that is why I think that the way to die is to take things in our own hands. Whether you are 100 years old or 1,000 years old, it doesn't matter. At a point, you come to a realization that it is the right thing to do. We'll see whether this is what is going to happen. But I think that more and more societies are going to legalize euthanasia rather than the handful that allow it today. And more groups of people will understand that the way people die today is not humane, and it's not a way that we should preserve and cherish, but there can be better ways to live and better ways to die.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, it's been a fantastic opportunity to talk to you again, David. I very much look forward to seeing you around the traps at a conference sometime. Yeah, so where are you off to next?
Um,
As in,
well,
like, overseas
I'm
travel?
just back from Israel.
Hmm.
I'm just back from Israel where I had a great time, and I will be going to New York. I'm right now in
Yeah.
Italy. So, just around the planet for the moment. I am looking forward when our conversations are going to be encumbered by speed of light limitations because we will be farther out, whether you will be on the moon, I will be on the Mars, or on a
Hmm.
starship going to the next star. And
Yeah,
it will
or
be a
maybe
beautiful challenge.
that would be, maybe we can use entanglement technologies to communicate in real time over really, really, really long distances. Who
That is for
knows?
another conversation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. See you soon.